They told us the tunnel behind the school was just an old drainage path, but no one ever explained why it was sealed shut. Until one night, someone went inside and came back with marks that no human could make. This is the true story of the old tunnel, and the thing that still waits inside. It was a cold autumn evening, and the sky above the school was turning dark. The last bell had rung an hour ago, but Liam and his friends were still hanging around the playground. The air smelled of wet leaves, and the wind carried a low whistle through the empty basketball court. Behind the school, hidden behind a row of overgrown bushes, stood the old tunnel. Most students didn't even know it existed. The entrance was covered with a rusty iron gate, chained shut years ago. The story went that decades back, a student had gone inside during a game of hide-and-seek, and never came out. Since then, the school had kept the area locked, warning everyone to stay away. But that night, Liam's friends noticed something strange. The gate wasn't fully closed. One side hung slightly open, creaking in the wind. The chain dangled loosely, as if someone had cut it. "Bet you won't go in," one of his friends challenged, smirking. Liam laughed nervously. "It's just an old tunnel. What's the worst that could happen?" But deep down, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. The kind of feeling you get before something bad happens. His friends began chanting, "Go in! Go in!" Their voices echoed in the empty yard. Liam didn't want to look scared in front of them, so he picked up the small flashlight from his backpack and stepped toward the tunnel. Up close, the entrance looked even creepier. The metal bars were cold to the touch, and the darkness inside seemed to swallow the light from the setting sun. A faint smell, damp, earthy, and strangely metallic, drifted out. Liam took a deep breath, pushed the gate wider, and stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the sound of the outside world seemed to fade away. No more wind, no more friends laughing, only the sound of his own footsteps, echoing deeper into the dark. Liam's flashlight beam cut through the pitch-black air, revealing only a narrow strip of the tunnel ahead. The walls were rough concrete, wet in some places, with dark stains that looked too red to be rust. Drops of water fell from the ceiling, each one echoing like a slow-ticking clock. The air inside was heavy and cold. With each breath, Liam could see a faint mist escape his mouth. He tried to convince himself it was just the chill of the underground, but the cold felt different, like it wasn't just from the air, but from the place itself. Graffiti covered parts of the wall, but most of it looked old and faded. Only a few marks seemed fresh, glowing faintly under the flashlight. Strange symbols, spirals, crooked crosses, and shapes that looked like stretched human faces covered a section near the floor. Liam didn't recognize any of them, but the sight made his stomach twist. As he walked deeper, the sound of his footsteps changed. At first, it was the hollow thud of sneakers on concrete. Then suddenly, it became a damp squelch, like stepping on wet cloth. Liam stopped, shined the flashlight down, and saw patches of dark sludge on the ground. It glistened slightly and gave off a metallic smell. The further he went, the more the tunnel seemed to close in. The ceiling was lower now, and the walls felt closer together. The darkness ahead didn't look like normal darkness. It was thicker, almost like it wanted to hide something. Then, without warning, Liam felt a sudden rush of air against the back of his neck. It wasn't strong enough to be a wind from outside, and it was warm, almost like a breath. He spun around, the flashlight beam shaking in his hand. No one was there. The entrance was gone from sight, swallowed by shadows. And for the first time since he stepped inside, Liam realized how far he had already gone, and how alone he really was. Liam kept moving, telling himself to stay calm. The tunnel felt endless, stretching far beyond what he had imagined. Every few seconds, he glanced over his shoulder, hoping to see the faint glow of the entrance. But there was nothing but a wall of black. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The sound of dripping water filled the silence, each drop echoing off the cold walls. Then he heard it. A faint sound, a single footstep somewhere behind him. He froze. The air felt heavier, like the darkness was pressing down on him. He turned quickly, shining the flashlight behind him. The beam reached only a few meters before being swallowed by shadows. There was no one there. Probably just water dripping, Liam whispered to himself, though his voice sounded too loud in the tunnel. He took another step forward. The sound came again. This time it was 2 footsteps, slow and deliberate, matching the exact rhythm of his own, only slightly delayed. Liam's heartbeat quickened. He swung the flashlight around wildly, trying to pierce the darkness behind him. Still nothing. The tunnel remained empty, or at least it looked empty. He decided to keep walking, faster now. The footsteps followed. Every step he took, another echoed faintly after it. Sometimes closer, sometimes further away, as if whoever, or whatever was there, was playing a game with him. Liam tried to call out, "Hello? Who's there?" No answer. The tunnel seemed to grow colder with each step. The sound of his breathing filled his ears, and the footsteps behind him grew softer, until they stopped completely. Liam slowed down, straining to hear. The silence felt worse than the noise. Then, right next to his ear, a whisper slipped through the darkness, so close he felt the warmth of it. "Keep going." Liam spun around in panic, flashlight trembling in his hand. There was still no one there. But now, the darkness behind him felt alive. Liam's hands were slick with sweat, the flashlight slipping slightly in his grip. His ears rang from the sudden silence after that whisper. He told himself it was just his imagination, maybe the echo of his own breath. But deep down he knew it wasn't. The air in the tunnel had changed. It was colder now, but not the kind of cold that made your skin shiver. This was deeper. It felt like it was sinking into his bones. Every breath left his lungs in a pale cloud, drifting slowly in front of him. He walked forward cautiously, scanning the walls. The graffiti was gone now. In its place were long, jagged scratches running along the concrete. They were too deep for a knife, and spaced too far apart for human fingers. Then it came again. A whisper. This time it wasn't behind him. It came from somewhere ahead. Far away, but close enough to make his skin crawl. Come closer. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but it slid into his mind like a cold needle. It wasn't just sound. It was inside his head, curling around his thoughts. Liam froze. His legs wanted to turn and run, but something about the voice made him want to obey. His heart pounded, yet he took a slow step forward. Then another. The beam of his flashlight began to fade, not from low batteries, but as if the darkness itself was pushing back against the light. Ahead, he could barely see a faint outline of something. Maybe a doorway, maybe just the tunnel narrowing. "You're almost here." The voice murmured again, closer this time. The sound wasn't just in front of him now. It was in the walls, in the floor, even in the air he breathed. And then, as he took one more hesitant step, the whisper turned into a slow, rasping breath, coming from right in front of him. Liam's flashlight beam trembled across the rough tunnel walls until it caught something ahead. A shape that didn't match the endless gray concrete. It was a door. An old, heavy metal door, wedged into the tunnel wall as if it had been there for decades. Thick rust covered its surface, flaking away in jagged patches. The hinges looked swollen with corrosion, yet the door stood perfectly shut. Liam stepped closer, his sneakers crunching over broken bits of concrete. As the light moved across the metal, he saw something that made his stomach knot: handprints. They were smeared all over the door in a dark, dried color that didn't look like paint. Some prints were small, like a child's hands, but others were long and narrow, the fingers ending in sharp points, almost like claws. He crouched slightly, touching one of the smaller prints. The surface was rough and cold, and when he pulled his fingers away, they were stained faintly red. The air near the door felt heavier, thicker, almost hard to breathe. There was a faint humming sound coming from the other side, so low that Liam felt it more than he heard it. He put his ear against the cold metal. At first, he heard nothing but that deep, steady hum. Then faintly something else. Voices. They were muffled, overlapping, whispering words he couldn't understand. Some were high-pitched and panicked, others deep and broken, like someone speaking through water. The voices grew louder for a moment, and then, Bienji. Something struck the other side of the door hard enough to make the metal shudder under Liam's hands. He stumbled backward, heart racing. The whispers stopped instantly. The tunnel went silent again, except for the faint sound of his own breathing. But as Liam stood frozen, staring at the rusted door, he saw the handle twitch. Liam's eyes locked on the rusted handle. It trembled once, then stopped. He told himself it could have been the wind, but the air inside the tunnel was still and heavy. No breeze. No movement, except his own shaky breathing. He slowly swept his flashlight across the walls, making sure nothing had followed him from the entrance. The beam slid over rough concrete, then over the floor, and then stopped on the far left corner. His stomach tightened. There, stretching along the wall, was a shadow. It was tall, far taller than any person, and its limbs were impossibly long, bent at strange angles. The thing casting it was nowhere to be seen. There was no one standing in that corner. Yet the shadow was moving. At first, it only shifted slightly, swaying like it was breathing. Then one of its arms lifted, slow and deliberate, the long fingers curling as if it was reaching toward him. Liam's flashlight flickered. For a second, the shadow vanished, and when the light steadied, it was closer. He backed away, keeping the beam on it. His foot hit a loose piece of concrete, sending it skittering across the floor. The sound echoed far too loud in the narrow space. The shadow froze. Then, in one quick, unnatural motion, it darted along the wall, stopping just a few feet from the rusted door, and from him. The darkness seemed thicker now, pressing against the edges of the flashlight's glow. Liam felt the skin on his arms rise in goosebumps. He whispered to himself, "It's not real, it's not real." But his voice was shaking. The shadow tilted its head. It didn't make a sound, but Liam felt something, like an unspoken question sliding into his mind. A feeling that whatever was behind that door, and whatever was making this shadow, were connected, and neither wanted him to leave. Liam's breathing was shallow, each inhale scraping against the cold in his chest. He didn't dare take his eyes off the shadow, but something else pulled at his attention. A faint sound from behind the rusted door. At first, it was just the low humming again. Then it changed. Whispers. Dozens of them. They overlapped and tangled together until it was impossible to tell where one ended and another began. Some were quick and frantic, others slow and trembling. Then the whispers grew louder, and turned into screams. The sound hit Liam like a physical force. High-pitched shrieks of children mixed with deep, raw cries that sounded inhuman. It was as if hundreds of voices were trapped behind the door, begging, pleading, clawing for release. He stumbled back, covering his ears, but it didn't help. The screams weren't just in the air, they were inside his head. He could feel them rattling his skull. The shadow reacted. It stretched taller, its limbs jerking unnaturally as if feeding off the noise. The tips of its fingers dragged along the wall, leaving deep, black grooves in the concrete. The door rattled violently, the rusted hinges screeching. Something on the other side slammed into it again and again, shaking the entire tunnel. Dust rained down from the ceiling, the air filling with a metallic taste. Then, cutting through the chaos, one voice rose above the rest. It was a child's voice. Weak. Desperate. "Help, please let us out." The screaming stopped. All at once. The silence was so sudden it made Liam's ears ring. The shadow lowered its head toward him, almost as if it was waiting to see what he would do next. Liam's hand trembled on the flashlight. Part of him wanted to run. Another part, the part that still heard that small voice in his mind, wanted to open the door. Liam took a step back from the rusted door, heart pounding in his ears. His flashlight trembled in his hand, the beam twitching across the walls. He wanted to run, to put as much distance between himself and that door as possible. But then, without warning, the handle turned. Slowly. The old metal creaked, echoing through the tunnel like a scream. The sound was so sharp it made Liam's teeth ache. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. He hadn't touched it. He didn't want it open. The door shifted, the hinges shrieking in protest, until a thin line of pure black appeared between the frame and the metal. It wasn't darkness like the tunnel's shadows. This was thicker, heavier, almost like a living thing pressing to get out. Cold air poured from the gap, coating Liam's skin in ice. The faint humming from before returned, but now it was louder, vibrating in his chest. The shadow on the wall twitched violently, its limbs flaring out as if excited. It slid closer to the door, merging into the spreading blackness. Liam took another step back, his shoe scraping loudly against the concrete. The sound seemed to trigger something. The door swung open on its own. Beyond it was not another part of the tunnel. It was nothing. A swirling, pitch-black fog that seemed to move in slow waves, like a tide breathing in and out. Shapes shifted inside it. Faces, hands, outlines of bodies, appearing for seconds before melting away. Every part of Liam's instincts screamed to run, but his legs felt heavy, rooted to the spot. Something inside the blackness shifted forward. The voices returned, whispering all at once, their words tangled together. The cold grew sharper, cutting into his lungs with every breath. And then everything went silent. From inside the fog, two pale shapes appeared. Hands. They reached out for him. Liam froze as the pale shapes pushed through the black fog. They were hands, human in shape, but wrong in every other way. The skin was wet and rubbery, with a faint gray-blue tint, as if it had been soaking in cold water for too long. Long blackened nails curved at the tips, catching the dim flashlight beam. They dripped a thin, dark liquid that hit the floor with soft splats. The hands moved slowly, almost gently, until one of them brushed against Liam's wrist. The touch was like ice and fire at the same time, freezing cold on the surface but burning deep into his skin. He gasped and tried to yank his arm back, but the grip tightened. The thing's fingers were impossibly strong. They dug into his flesh, the nails piercing skin. Liam felt warm blood trickle down his arm, but what terrified him more was the sensation that something was pulling inside him. Like the hand wasn't just grabbing his body, but trying to take something else. His flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling until its beam lit the inside of the fog. And there they were. Faces. Dozens of them. Pale, hollow-eyed, and stretched with silent screams. Some looked like children, others like adults, but all were trapped in the swirling darkness, their mouths moving soundlessly. Every face stared directly at him. One of them, a boy with messy hair and sunken cheeks, pressed his face to the edge of the fog, his mouth moving in slow, desperate words. Liam couldn't hear him, but he understood. Run. The grip on his wrist tightened again. Sharp pain jolting up his arm. The other pale hand reached for his throat. A cold wave of panic crashed over him, breaking the paralysis. Liam twisted hard, ripping his wrist free. The nails tore into his skin, leaving deep bleeding gouges. He stumbled backward, grabbing the fallen flashlight. The pale hands retreated slowly into the black fog, but the faces, they stayed, watching. And all of them were smiling now. Liam's chest burned as he staggered backward, clutching his bleeding wrist. The flashlight beam shook wildly in his trembling hand, slicing through the tunnel's darkness. The rusted door was still open. The black fog swirled inside it, but the pale hands no longer reached for him. The faces had sunk deeper into the shifting darkness, except for one. The boy's face. He hovered at the edge of the fog, still staring at Liam, his mouth curling into the faintest smile. Slowly he raised his own hand and pointed straight at Liam's chest. That was enough. Liam turned and ran. Every step echoed like thunder in the tunnel. He didn't dare look back. The air seemed to grow thicker the closer he got to the entrance, pulling at him, slowing him down. His lungs screamed for air. His legs felt heavy, but he pushed harder. Somewhere behind him, metal slammed. The sound of the rusted door closing rang out, deep and final. Then came the whispers, faint at first, then growing louder, chasing him through the darkness. He burst out of the tunnel and into the cold night air, falling to his knees in the overgrown grass. His friends were gone. The schoolyard was empty, silent except for the wind in the bushes. Liam looked back. The tunnel's gate was closed, the rusty chain wrapped tightly around it. The gap that had been open before was gone, as if it had never been there. His wrist throbbed with pain. In the dim light from the school building, he could see the deep nail marks still bleeding. But what made his skin crawl wasn't the blood. It was the faint black residue left in the wounds, seeping slowly into his skin. From the darkness behind the gate, a soft voice drifted out. "See you soon."